as the largest climate change rally in history. They were also chanting, "Hey, Obama, we don't want no climate drama." Well, actually, they do, as in right now. And why not? The president fueled the fire.
We can choose to believe that Superstorm Sandy and the most severe drought in decades and the worst wildfires some states have ever seen were all just a freak coincidence. Or we can choose to believe in the overwhelming judgment of science and act before it's too late.
That was nirvana to climate change activists. Hell no to climate change skeptics.
Look, the government can't change the weather. I said that in the speech. No, we can pass a bunch of laws that will destroy our economy, but it isn't going to change the weather.
And there's the thing. All those climate change activists in D.C., they want the president to block the Keystone Pipeline. You know, the pipeline that will most likely add to our pollution problem, which in part causes global warming. But that pipeline will also create jobs and further energy independence. And yeah, gas prices are now $3.73 a gallon. So Talkback today is now the time for climate change legislation. Jason.
Yes, Barack Obama can do a lot about climate change, but really, he needs to start simple. He needs to take an old idea that he and John McCain were pitching around in 2008, which is a promise to change all the federal fleet of cars, the FBI, the federal marshals, every year to electronic cars. The reason that we can't get substantive climate change is because you can't convince industry and the car industry and everything else like that it actually makes sense financially. So Obama can do a lot. He should do something that provides jobs and cleans the air, not just talk policy.
Oh, that sounds so simple, Anna.
Well, it sounds simple, but it's not. Look, good luck trying to pass any legislation through Congress that doesn't come from Congress. Right now, some of the controversial issues that stand a glimmer of hope are immigration and then maybe some aspects of gun control. But it is because in Congress themselves, they have found common ground and they are pushing it themselves. Unfortunately, the reality is that President Obama right now has the reverse Midas touch. Everything he touches turns to dirt, and it's not going to get through Congress. That's just where we are, folks.
Everything turns to dirt, Pete?
Well, listen, I would first ask for everybody to put up their hands on this panel if they believe a man is the biggest factor contributing to climate change right now. I hope that's everybody, Carol, obviously. No, we're not all putting our hands up, but no. Anyway,
No.
Well, that's what's sad about this. It's really sad, and it's Republicans and only Republicans in Congress that don't believe in science. Climate change is the biggest threat to man outside of a nuclear holocaust. And the fact that we still have Republicans, some of which are on the Science Committee, that think that don't believe in science is embarrassing, and it's horrific. I mean, is now the time to address climate change? No, it was 20 years ago, Carol. We have to do something about this. We have to do it now. It's one of my biggest issues for me personally. I just bought a Chevy Volt. I'm trying to be the change I want to see in life. But, you know, this is something that we have to pass down to our kids. This is something that the next generation has to make a shift on. And, you know, the fact that Republicans in Congress don't believe in science, it's embarrassing. It makes me embarrassed by it.
And, Ron, I mean, Pete does have a point. 98% of scientists out there believe climate change is caused, is man-made. Pollution adds to global warming. There's really no doubt about that. So why can't anyone find any common ground?
There's really no doubt about that. I certainly dispute the 98% factor of scientists who believe that global climate change is real. The fact of the matter is that this president, rather than trying to pass global climate change, he actually should try to change the economy in this country. We have never had unemployment under 7.8% during the Obama presidency. Why at this point are we going to pass more crippling regulations that are going to hurt small business, that are going to retard the economic growth that we need? My beloved home state of California, the home of the greenies, the home of the hope and change and global climate change and whatnot. Well, you know what? Those green regulations have killed innovation in California. We certainly don't need that for the rest of the United States.
See, this is exactly the sort of false dichotomy that we're talking about here. If you look at what Pete says and you look at what Ron says, both of these problems can be solved. If the president said, look, let's start changing these cars over. Let's make the federal fleet out of Chevy Volts. You're putting people to work and you're fixing the economy. The problem is both sides are pretending that they can't find a mutual solution. The solution's been out there for years and no one's taken it.
You know, Anna, we did it back in the 70s. 70s
tell
with
you
acid
something.
rain. Well, just 1 second. We did it back in the 70s with acid rain. There was a terrible problem, and the government sort of like worked with industry, and they fixed that problem. Why can't we fix our problems today?
Oil.
Because nobody's talking to each other, Carol. Let's begin with that. The president doesn't talk to Congress. Congress doesn't talk to the president. Nobody's talking to industry. We are in a very dysfunctional place right now in Washington, D.C. It requires a lot of cooperation. I see Pete shaking his head, but I would ask my friend Pete, well, listen, there was a time when President Obama first got elected, when he had a majority in the House, when he had a majority in the Senate, and when he did have the Midas touch and could walk on water and could get just about any legislation through.
That's because we have a rule. That's because we have an arcane rule in the U.S. Senate that prevents anything from being passed without 60 senators instead of a simple majority. Cap and trade was passed by the House, and it is not true. It is not true, and everybody on this panel knows that it is not true.
Okay, no shouting, no shouting. It's a little early in the morning, Pete.
Anna, you know I love you and adore you, but you also know this issue gets my ire up for sure. I am getting very little of that because it's so polluted. But Anna, as you know, this has nothing to do with whether or not Congress gets along. It has everything to do with the oil industry owning Congress, including Democrats.
Exactly.
Absolutely why. Absolutely why.
Well,
this is about campaign finance.
Well, then let's say that. Let's say including Democrats.
I just did.
You laid the blame on nobody but Republicans.
I raise the blame on Republicans because Republicans don't agree on the problem. They don't agree on the problem. All Democrats believe in the science that the vast majority, almost every single climate scientist, download an app called Skeptical Science, everybody. Download that app for your phone right now, Skeptical Science.
I will say, Jason, just to button this conversation up, that the activists, the climate change activists in D.C., they concentrated on the Keystone Pipeline. Why concentrate on that? Couldn't they pick something else?
Because it's a cute visual and it makes sense, and you can have people dressed up as bald eagles covered in oil. I mean, look, this is what I'm saying. This is a real problem, and this is a problem that has a real solution. And it's up to the Republicans to finally stop just standing in the way of Barack Obama, and it's up to Democrats to actually fight for this issue. I don't want to live in a world where we have to have El Nino and Hurricane Katrina and everything every 10 or 15 months because we can't fix a problem that every common sense scientist agrees on. The solutions are there, like I said.
Okay, what are our Facebook friends saying about this question? Is now the time for climate change legislation? This from Bill. Now is the time to talk about it for sure. How can you argue with this logic? We should err on the side of the planet. It's the only one we have. This from Henrique. Making bank robbery